As a pretty big fan of Destiny, the news of new looter shooters always piques my interest. Not always do they turn out great, in fact many of them die off almost immediately, but some have stuck around like Warframe, Destiny, and The Division to name just a few. Today, I thought we'd take a look at 5 upcoming looter shooters to release in 2020 and beyond. At number 5, we have Plan 8, which the developer Pearl Abyss is calling an open-world exosuit shooter. Pearl Abyss is known for their popular MMO game Black Desert Online, and it looks like they're trying to extend into the looter shooter market with Plan 8. The game is visually very impressive and looks pretty solid mechanically as well. And I know this is just trailer footage, but the abilities, the movement, and the shooting all look extremely polished. Now this is the first time Pearl Abyss has made a shooter, but they have an extensive history with MMO games in the past, which can hopefully translate positively into a looter shooter. People have said this looks like a combination of The Division, The Surge, and Anthem, which at a glance I completely understand that assessment. A release date is still unconfirmed, but it is speculated to be sometime later this year.
Not again.
At number 4, we have Outriders. Outriders is an upcoming third-person looter shooter developed by People Can Fly, who are known for their development on games like Gears of War Judgment and Bulletstorm. The game is a drop-in, drop-out co-op experience like many other games in the looter shooter genre, and the gameplay seems to be a pretty solid mix of shooting 3 different classes of weapons, similar to Destiny, and using various abilities. Personally, to me, the gameplay looks a lot like Remnant from the Ashes, which is a very solid Souls-like shooter that released last year, and I really loved my time with Remnant from the Ashes, and Outriders looks to be very similar in the gameplay. The game will have 4 separate classes, 3 of which have been shown off: the Pyromancer, the Trickster, and the Devastator, each with seemingly unique playstyles and abilities. The loot and character customization looks very similar to Destiny, which isn't something I'd personally complain about because I think the UI for Destiny is really good, and to see something similar in Outriders is more of a positive for me. Loot will have varying qualities to them, just like most looter shooter games like Uncommon, Rare, Legendary, etc., and overall seems like your typical looter shooter. There are big boss fights in the game that I imagine will be a massive part of the endgame experience, which the developers are saying they are really trying to focus on. They've been on record saying they wanted a complete endgame experience for players on launch, not something you'd have to wait for to release later. Outriders is set to release in December 2020. And number 3 is the Hive. The Hive is a first-person round-based looter shooter inspired by games like Stalker and Hunt Showdown. The game takes place in a world where legends and folklore are part of reality, and you as a player have to survive, progress, and fight for weapons and resources before extracting those items to improve your character's strength. Doing so will unlock more challenging areas to tackle further into the game. There is also elements of PvP in the world similar to something like Escape from Tarkov or The Division's Dark Zone, and the game was announced back in November 2019, but there hasn't been any news about the game since. At number 2 is Witchfire. Being developed by a company called The Astronauts, the game is said to be inspired by From Software's Souls series and Bungie's Destiny. But the developers said it's not just another typical looter shooter game. The developers strictly said they don't want to fall into the typical looter shooter business model that so many other looter shooters fall into. Rather, they want to create a complete and deep gameplay experience, even if that means the game won't be treated as a live service. It kind of reminds me how games like Borderlands handle itself as a looter shooter, where it feels more like a complete package rather than some endless live service, which I look at as a very solid positive. Witchfire also looks extremely beautiful graphically, and the gameplay looks very smooth and addicting. Witchfire is definitely on my highly anticipated list this year. And at number 1 we have Godfall, which is being developed by Counterplay Games and published by Gearbox, and is set to release as a PlayStation 5 launch title, as well as being released on PC. Rather than a looter shooter, they are calling it an action role-playing looter slasher, as combat is melee focused rather than ranged like shooting. The game is set in a high fantasy setting split into the realms of earth, water, air, fire, and spirit. Players take the role of one of the last exalted knights ordered to prevent a major apocalyptic event. The player has 3 primary classes to select from, based on which armor set they equip. Additional armor sets, or as they're called, valor plates and augments, can be equipped to customize how this character class will play out. It supports single player and up to 3 players in drop-in, drop-out co-op. Counterplay Games is a 75-person studio in California with several developers that had worked on other looter shooters such as Destiny 2. And it'll be interesting to see how a melee combat focused looter game will actually pan out. I imagine the game will have some kind of ranged attacks, maybe by throwing your sword, or maybe a pull ability to pull enemies toward you, but we'll have to wait and see. As for the graphics and the world design, it looks absolutely gorgeous, and it'll be amazing to see this game in action. Like I mentioned, the game is set to release this holiday season as a launch title for the PlayStation 5 and also on PC.
That's about right. No storm can stop us.
I think if I had to pick which ones I'm most excited for, it'd be Godfall and Outriders. Outriders is by far the game we've seen the most of at this point in terms of gameplay and progression systems, and its similarities to a game that I loved, that being Remnant from the Ashes. So maybe it slightly gets the edge for me for that reason. But Witchfire also looks really incredible as well, and right up my alley as a fan of the Souls games and the graphic and art style they're going with. Not to mention, I do want to see how Godfall plays out as a looter slasher, kind of a nice twist on the genre, so we'll see how these pan out. I'm actually really excited to see more from these games and more information and trailers, and hopefully we'll see some more in June. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more videos just like this one, and also let me know down in the comments section which looter shooter you're most anticipating this year. I'm always curious to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below, but I'd like to thank you guys for watching the video, and I will catch you all in my next video.